Hey, and welcome to Big Questions and Little Answers. I'm Jaylee, and I'm here with my dad.
And I'm Brandon, and I'm the dad. Thanks for joining us today. We have a big question for all of us to think about, and it is this. Why does God let bad things happen? Jaylee, what do you think on that one?
I think God lets bad things happen because for our glory and for
our glory. Whoa.
For God's glory and our good.
Yeah. Can you expound on that a little bit more? What do you mean by for His glory and our good? What do you mean by that?
Like for His glory, because bad things happen and we realize how good things usually are. So that could help us glorify Him.
That's a good...
Thanks for letting good things happen as well.
That's right. Without something bad going on, you can't really tell what's good, right? Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, and if we had a perfect life, we wouldn't really appreciate anything. So that's why it's for our good.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great answer right there. And man, I guess we're done. I think there's a little bit more to it too. We'll explain this, but I think there's a little pre-question that we can ask before we answer the bigger question. And the pre-question is why do bad things happen in the first place? Well, I can tell you, things that are bad happen in the first place because of the fall. And what I mean by that is because sin entered the world. Do you remember back in the day, Jaylee, where Adam and Eve lived happily in the garden?
Yeah. And
then sin entered the world, and they disobeyed God, and as a result, there was just the horrible consequence of sin, and that's what we call it. That's anything bad. Anything bad is just the result of the horrible consequence of sin. So I don't know if you can think of anything bad off the top of your head, like people hurting one another or murder. That's bad. But people do that because of sin. It's sin that really triggers or causes people to behave in such a manner. So that's why we have bad things in the first place. It's because sin has entered the world, and we're sinners, like Adam and Eve were, and we live in this sin-cursed world. So when we hear news, which if you turn on the news nowadays, it's all about violence. It's all about wars, crimes. It's all bad news, right? I don't know why they don't just call it bad news. Hey, what are the bad news today, we look at the bad news, I'll say, and there's kids all over the world who are experiencing natural disasters. There's hurricanes, there's famines, there's earthquakes. I think we already said wars, tornadoes. Tornadoes.
Like mini tornadoes. Tornadoes.
What else is there? Hunger, right? There's a lot of sickness. There's abuse. There's all kinds of bad things that are going on.
Tornadoes.
Yeah. And here's the thing, though. God is all powerful. And we know that He's good. And if He's all powerful and if He's good, why doesn't He stop these bad things from happening? That's the question. So why does God allow so much suffering? And although we can't completely understand why God allows what He does, we can totally trust that God's ways and thoughts are higher and better than ours, because that's what Isaiah 55:9 tells us. But we must also remember, I think that we actually don't deserve anything good. So the fact that anything good happens to us is a gift. Yeah. Do you know what I mean by that? If we're sinners and we have fallen short of the glory of God, the fact that we're even able to experience anything good is a gift in itself, because we don't deserve it. And we don't deserve it because we're sinful people. We actually deserve to suffer. We deserve death. We deserve that separation from God. Ultimately, we can say it like this: we deserve the bad things that happen. But because of God's grace, because of His love and His mercy, do you remember what He did for us to be able to experience that goodness and that forgiveness, Jaylee?
Yeah. Died on the cross.
He sent Jesus to die on the cross. He took the punishment for believers. And on the third day, he rose. And through that resurrection, Jesus showed his victory over sin and death by coming to life again because he's amazing. And so that's how God saves sinners who turn from sin, and they place their trust in Jesus. And so we're saved from that. However, here's the truth, and the fact of the matter is, even a Christian still suffers in this world. There's still a lot of suffering. Like, for instance, listeners may not know this, but Jaylee's just coming out of a cough. She had a flu a couple of weeks ago, and she still has those lingering effects like a cough, and that's suffering, like that's not fun. It hurts. It bothers me, so even believers still suffer sometimes. And God, but like, I like what you said though, Jaylee, was such a good answer. God uses our suffering for good sometimes, because then we can go to him and be like, God, help me. We have a relationship with God. And then we see his power when he heals us. We're like, God, thank you, and our relationship with him just grows. But, God also uses suffering to make us more like Jesus, or to show his strength in our weakness. It's a good reminder that we're not all powerful.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we need him. And it's a good reminder that he's for us and he's watching over us. And even though things are tough sometimes, he uses that, like you said, for his glory, which means if we go through hard times, we're going to get stronger. We're going to cling to him. We're going to learn from it. And ultimately, we're better for him, in the sense that we can serve him better. We can talk to other people because we've been there. We understand the suffering that they're going through, perhaps. Like, you probably have friends, Jaylee, who are sad. You probably have friends. No, you probably have friends who like have gone through hard moments where you totally understand where they're coming from, and you're probably able to tell them something to encourage them or to help them through that hard time. That's what friends do, But that's the thing, is the Lord allows us to comfort one another as he comforts us. And so one day, though, here's the good news. One day Jesus will return and he'll bring his whole creation to heaven, like he's gonna just take us to be with him, and we will be in that new heaven and that new earth. And in that place is going to be free from sin, which means it'll be free from suffering, which means there's no bad there. So this whole us having to go through bad moments or bad times or having to live through bad things, it's temporary and it's only now. But when we're with him in heaven, it's going to be glorious. Glorious. Yeah. Look at what 1 Peter 2:21 says. Can you read that for us, please?
Yes. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example, so that you might follow in his steps.
That's right. Christ suffered, so we can suffer too. He suffered for us to leave as an example, and so we can follow his steps. We can understand that suffering is actually not necessarily all that bad either. And so, especially because of what he accomplished. So one day we'll know that everything will be made well. Can you read James chapter 1:2-4?
Yes. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing.
Mm-hmm. That means that when we face troubles of all kinds, the bad times, it actually helps us grow. And actually what James calls us here is to think of it as pure joy, to consider it as a gift from God, almost as like, hey, have you ever worked out, Jaylee? I don't think you've been to the gym, have you?
Gymnastics.
Yes, you do gymnastics. Like when you work hard, it hurts sometimes, but it pays off because it makes you stronger, like that. And so we can consider these bad times or these times of trials opportunities for us to grow and become stronger. It's just what's important is to consider the fact that God is moving and we can be joyful knowing that he's doing something wonderful, even though bad things are happening around us. And that in itself is comforting. And so I would say God is just, and he's not one to say, oh, you know what? I'm just going to take away every consequence. No, he's still just, and he's still good. Just like your dad. Let's talk about your dad here for a second. If you do something wrong, Jaylee, does that come with a consequence?
Yeah.
Does that mean I don't love you?
No.
No. And so likewise, sometimes because we sin, there are consequences that come with that sin. That doesn't mean that God doesn't love us. It just means that because he's just, we're going to have to face those consequences. And so therefore, I think that's one of the reasons why God allows bad things to happen. Because he's just, and because of sin. And he has a plan for redemption for us. And bad things are actually not always all that bad if they're going to grow us and strengthen us and allow us to give him all the glory. So let's ask the question one more time, and I'll let you give us the little answer for it. Why does God let bad things happen, Jaylee?
Our little answer today is bad things happen because God allows the consequences of sin in the world. But he will one day make all things right.
That's right. We can trust on that. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have a question of your own, you can email it to us. Our email address is
bigquestion@wayfamily.church.
That's right. bigquestion@wayfamily.church. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye.